other instructional leaders webinar on using the ELA Essentials Coaching Checklist. If you came to the admin webinar this summer, you got a very brief introduction to the ELA Essentials Coaching Checklist. And we're going to go into a bit more depth with that today. If you weren't with us this summer, that's okay, because we will go over most of what we did this summer again. So you will hear that information. My name is Brenna McCormick, and I'm the middle level ELA Education Associate at the State Department of Education in the Office of Assessment and Standards. With me today, co-piloting, I have Mandy Hawker, who is our elementary education associate. So I'm thankful to have her to help me kind of manage the chat today and make sure we have any problems that we have solved. I do want to see who is in the room with us today. So if you would take a moment and just give me your name, maybe your position and what district you're serving, I'd love to see who we have with us. Hey, Mary Beth. Melissa, good morning. Good morning, Tina. Good morning. Cynthia, Kathy. Hey, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. So glad to see so many coaches, administrators. Hey, Lacey. Oh, thanks. Hey, Brittany. Hey, Kendra. Wonderful. I see we have a wide representation. So excited to see so many people from across the state. So we'll go ahead and hop in again. My name is Brenna McCormick, and you are welcome to unmute and ask questions or pop them in the chat if you have them as we go through our work today. So we're going to start just real quick about discussing some of our housekeeping items. At the end of our session today, I will have a feedback form. That is also how we're going to track your attendance today. And if you would like to receive a certification credit for your participation today, we'll need you to complete that feedback form as your proof that you attended for today's session in its entirety. So at the end today, be looking for that feedback form. We also have a digital landing page for you to use today. I'm popping that in the chat right now, but you can also type in this tiny URL that you see on the screen. We will reference this digital landing page several times, and there'll be some links for you to click. So if you have the ability to go ahead and open that up, encourage you to go ahead and do that, and I'll give you just a minute. All right, any questions or difficulties getting that open? It should force a copy. All right. If you end up needing it again, just, oh, okay. Mandy, can you see if we can get Michelle maybe a PDF version or of some sort? Okay. All right, Michelle, Mandy will send you an email with a different version. Okay, so let's hop into it with our purpose for today. So my goal today is to empower our K-5 instructional leaders. So that includes our administrators, our coaches, people at the district office, anybody who's supporting instruction with the 2024 SCCCR ELA standards.
You know, like when we at a conference.
Sorry.
I don't find that.
Thank you. With the tools and strategies needed to effectively align teacher observation and coaching practices with the new standards. It's important, I think, to remember that not all administrators or instructional coaches come from an ELA background. I know in my experience, it wasn't until my very last couple years of teaching that I had an administrator who was ELA background. I know some friends who are coaches who came from outside of ELA background who are now coaching ELA, and they're like, I'm not entirely sure what to do here. And that's kind of where this project of the ELA Essentials Checklist was born. And, we have new standards, and particularly with this new Foundations of Literacy strand for our elementary grades, it's important that we all understand those expectations, how content and rigor shift from grade to grade, and how these indicators are best instructed. So that's our goal for today. So we're going to start with just a little common ground reading where we're going to read, reflect, and respond. So on your digital landing page, there are 6 excerpts. This is pages 1 and 2 of your landing page. And I want you to skim over those 6 and just choose 2 to respond to. You're going to provide a personal reflection on at least 2 of the excerpts. You can make a connection, ask a question, provide an opinion, but there's a space for you to kind of jot your notes right on your landing page. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to do those personal reflections, and then we're going to hop into some breakout rooms for a quick chat just to get some common ground underneath us before we get started today. So I'll stop talking, give you about 5 minutes, and then we'll hop into breakout rooms. All right, in about 1 minute, we are going to pop you into breakout rooms. And in those rooms, I want you to discuss some of the excerpts you read, the reflections that you had. What connections did you make? What questions do you have?
I just heard that.
And possibly, how do you think these quotes will relate to today's work? So I'd love to hear a little bit about what you all were discussing in your room. So if someone wants to unmute or pop in the chat, just maybe one takeaway.
I agree, really focused on that last piece where we talked about it depends on the lens that you go into classrooms. I always want to go into a classroom with the lens of finding what's working, not finding what's not working. And that lens, it's always a coaching lens. It's rare. It's those handful of times that, and those are the worst scenarios. Those are the ones that we don't want to be in, where the evaluation is there for an end, not for a coaching situation. So I really think it's a culture that's built in the school and a mindset that you have when you're going in classrooms.
Yeah, I love that, Tina. Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other rooms? All right. So hopefully, as we go through today, we can talk about how to build those cultures that are solution-minded, that are positive, looking for strengths, and how we can build upon those. I love that lens, and I love that that is how we want to approach it. So when my team read through these quotes, we had a couple of takeaways as well that we felt were particularly important. We know that we want those who are evaluators or coaches or observers to have a deep and flexible knowledge about the content that's being taught and about how people learn that content, just as much as we want our teachers to have that knowledge. We want to ensure that all adults in the system are interacting in ways that increase the knowledge base of the collective whole. We know that teachers deserve timely, thoughtful feedback that informs their professional growth and development. We know that occasionally there may be defensiveness when it comes to change, and we are in a time of change in the realm of ELA right now. But that particularly comes when feedback originates from sources deemed maybe lacking in credibility. And that's a kind of a harsh way to say it, but I know I've experienced instances where it feels difficult to take content specific feedback from someone who maybe hasn't had experience in the content, if that makes sense. And then finally, we know that to actually progress toward improvement, we need to go beyond that desire for closure and into an ongoing conversation, which is what I think Tina was really pressing in on there with her comment of, it's not the end, the cycle should never end, right? It's an ongoing conversation. Okay, so this is what our agenda looks like for today. We're going to start with the why of the ELA Essentials Coaching Checklist. So if you haven't seen this checklist yet, we're going to tell you why it was written. We're going to talk about the structure of it, so how to read it and how to use it, and then you're going to practice. So before we get started, I'll just give you a little bit of background that the ELA Essentials Coaching Checklist is a tool that was designed to support school leaders or instructional leaders as you conduct coaching cycles to ensure that the teacher's instruction is evidence-based and aligned with the standards. So it's not an evaluative tool. It does not replace the Teaching Standards 4.0 evaluation rubric, but it works in tandem with it. It also does not represent the full breadth of the 2024 ELA standards for each grade band. What it does is kind of pairs those standards down into what we just called the essential skills that you can use to guide and support educators' understanding and knowledge of literacy instruction, establish a common practice around literacy practices. So let's take a look at the why. So the first thing is that the Essentials checklist supports an understanding of essential ELA expectations. And if we think back to the quotes that you just read, you may notice that that falls in line with that deep and flexible knowledge that all adults in the system are interacting in ways that increase the knowledge of the collective. And it can help when teachers may be defensive or a little hesitant to change. Another reason is that it supports an understanding of how ELA content should be instructed. And again, that falls in line with those 3 takeaways that we had from those quotes we read this morning. And then finally, it provides a structure for targeted and timely feedback outside of the formal evaluation process. And we know that aligns with several of our takeaways from the opening activity, where teachers deserve timely, thoughtful feedback. It's going to inform their professional growth and development. And then also form a structure that allows for ongoing conversation. All right. So this is a timeline that is representative of a typical evaluation cycle using the 4.0 rubric. You have your 3 stages. You have your pre-conference, your evaluation, and your post-conference. Thinking about this structure, if you're an evaluator or even an observer that conducts pre and post conferences as well, where do you see your greatest area of strength? What do you feel good at? Is it the observation itself? Is it helping set teachers up for success? Or is it in that post conference? And you can unmute or type in the chat. Pre-conference. Thank you, Tanya. Yes, Cynthia. In these 3 areas of the observation, coaching, evaluation process, where's your strength? Helping set the teacher up for success. The post-conference. Yes, Mandy, struggled with the post-conference. Sometimes it's difficult to just hone in on one area, right? Good. The observation in the post-conference. I always felt like I was really good at scripting the observation and making sure I noticed things. And that's okay, Cynthia. Even as a coaching cycle. Teresa, getting back to the post-conference in a timely manner. Yes, agreed. So my question for you is, if you participate in coaching, evaluation, any of that structure, what happens in these spaces with the stars? What's happening before the pre-conference, after the conference, after the observation, after the post-conference? And how does a coach or instructional leader or evaluator know what to do in the time outside of the formal evaluation? And particularly thinking through that lens of not seeing this process as an ending process, but an ongoing process. What do we do? How do we know how to do it? So I want you to consider a few scenarios of teachers or coaches or whoever the evaluator or observer may be, and how they would know what to do. So the first scenario, I was a high school teacher of chemistry for 17 years. I'm now a first-year API in a middle school, and ELA support is one of my responsibilities. I've read the new standards, but I'm not entirely sure what that content looks like in action. If I was an API and you put me in a chemistry classroom, I would have no idea if they were teaching the content right. I was no good at chemistry. So how does this particular teacher, or excuse me, API know if the content is correct in ELA when that might not necessarily be their background? All right, think about this one. I'm a new K-5 instructional coach for all subject areas, but when I was in the classroom, I taught GT, math, and science. I am expected to support K2 teachers in the implementation of the foundations of literacy. All right, that particular coach may need some support. I'm a district level ELA coordinator, but most of my career was in another state. I'm learning the South Carolina ELA standards alongside teachers this year. And then finally, I'm the department chair for ELA at my school. Part of my job responsibilities include coaching and mentoring our induction teachers. I sometimes find it difficult to provide task-focused feedback that is actionable, practical, and specific. So these are just a handful of scenarios in which you may find a administrator, a coach, a lead teacher who is expected to provide ELA support within the school, but might not have the rich content experiences to do that 100% effectively. And that is why this particular document was created. So I want you to reflect for just a second and think, even if you don't fall within one of those particular scenarios, what is your why? Why is a tool that can help you identify the expectations in ELA standards and indicators, and then coach teachers through that, a tool that is useful for you? Mm-hmm. Yes, Cynthia. And so that's part of that, building that credibility, right? You can feel free to put your why in the chat or unmute. Yes, Teresa, I love that. So you've got a lot of resources. I think right now we have 20 some odd support documents available for the standards. And so how do we keep the focus on the indicators when we've got so many resources, which seems like a first world problem, right? Too many resources. Yes, Jessica, helping coaches separate themselves from the evaluator role. Absolutely. And helping teachers understand also that coaches aren't there to evaluate, right? They're there to support. Excellent. Okay, so we talked about the why. You know now why this document was created. Let's talk about how it's actually set up. How are you going to use this document? All right, so on your landing page, you have a link on page 3 that says introduction pages for K2 and 3.5. And I'm going to put that link in the chat as well. And it just pulls the introduction to each of those grade band pieces in the coaching checklist. I would like for you to read over those pages on that link and then complete your Venn diagram chart. It's not the circle Venn diagram, but it's the same concept where you're going to consider the unique elements in K2 and 3.5, but then also where's their overlap. So if you take just about, we'll monitor, but 6 to 8 minutes to read over the introduction pages for K2 and 3.5 and complete the Venn diagram chart that is on page 3 of your landing page. If you finish up your Venn diagram chart early and want to give me an emoji in the chat so that I know that you're ready, I can gauge how much more time we need that way. Thanks, Cynthia. Awesome. So I see we have people starting to finish up. So as you are finishing, I want you to first consider what these two grade bands have in common. So what's included for the coaching checklist for both K2 and 3-5? You can unmute or you could put it in the chat. What did you notice that's the same? All right, Jamie. Yeah, so you've got your pre-observation coaching guide, your grade level expectations at a glance, your post-observation guide, um, essential look-fors. Absolutely. Now, when you look at the things that are different or unique to K2 and unique to 3-5, what do you notice? Thank you, Janet. Yes. Conferencing tied to the standards. Yes. K2 components include phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and comprehension, right, Emily? It's what they target. And so your 3-5 targets different categories, right? Critical reading, literary analysis, written expression, oral expression, academic language, vocabulary, and research. Sharon, yes, your K2 are those 5 pillars, the foundational skills. Why are they different? Is it that kindergarten through second graders don't research? They don't write? They don't practice vocabulary in the same way? Right. That K2 is targeting those essential reading skills, the foundational pieces that need to be established first. Right. And then 3-5 is going deeper into that content knowledge, targeted content knowledge. That's exactly right. So again, I said at the beginning, and I will mention this one more time, that this ELA Essentials Coaching Checklist does not cover the full breadth of the standards. It covers what we would consider to be the essentials. So note that if you were going to share this with others, you would want to make sure they know that this isn't every indicator and standard there is, right? That this is just a support as you conduct coaching cycles. And again, it is not evaluative. It does not replace the 4.0 rubric. It's just a place to start, particularly for those coaches, administrators, lead teachers who may not have had quite as much experience with these new standards. So let's hop specifically into K2. So when you get this document, and it is in your landing page linked at the bottom, but we're going to kind of step by step before we dive in. This is your table of contents for what's included in K2. So notice again the 5 ELA essentials that you already pointed out, that you have that the National Reading Panel had reported as the 5 components of reading instruction. You've got your introduction and overview here, pre-observation coaching guide, grade level expectations, observation look-fors, and your post-observation coaching conversation guide. Those 5 pieces are going to be the same for every grade band, but they'll be obviously grade specific. For K2, you have phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension as your ELA essentials. Now, every ELA essential is tied to a standard. If you look at phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency, you can find those in the Foundations of Literacy. If you look at vocabulary and comprehension, you can find those in the Applications of Reading strands. So know that those essentials, while they aren't necessarily written in the specific indicator language in the coaching guide, they do have ties to our standards and indicators. You have a pre-observation coaching guide that includes a lot of questions that you could potentially use, but an important part to notice is that your teachers will choose an ELA essentials focus. So, hey, this is the skill I'm working on. I'm working on phonics. That's what I want you to target and observe when you come in. But we always ask the teachers to go back and look at the indicators. Teachers' Tier 1 plans should always align with the content and rigor expectations of the grade level indicator, and that's a conversation you want to have pre-observation. We've also included here a space for you to consider your overarching expectations. If you aren't familiar with those, that's just how we do business in ELA. It's the things that every single ELA classroom should be focused on every single day. Reading and writing for a variety of purposes, collaboration, citing reasoning, justifying your reasoning with evidence. All of the things that make up really strong ELA instruction. And we hope that teachers will intentionally plan for that. And that's also part of your pre-observation conversation. Another thing to note is that this tool could also be used as a means for coaching differentiation practices. So if you have a student who's in 2nd grade who check, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, comprehension, we've got it, then move to the 3rd grade coaching checklist. Help that teacher develop some plans for an enrichment group, or vice versa, move backwards if you need to. You then will see that you'll have K through 2 expectations, and this is just where we match our focus, ELA essential, to the indicators. So this particular example is phonemic awareness. That would be your ELA essential. And if you look over, you've got all of the indicators that are directly tied to phonemic awareness. So again, we're connecting the ELA essential skill that I'm coaching to the indicators. The next thing you'll look for in your guide is the look for page. So every single one of the categories, the Coaching ELA Essentials, has an observation look for chart. At the top of that, you have a description. So if you're someone who's maybe new to the standards or new to ELA and you're thinking, I'm not really sure what phonemic awareness is, I haven't done letters yet, I'm not sure. You have a short description at the top, right? Phonemic awareness is systematic, explicit, you should be looking for systematic, explicit instruction in recognizing and manipulating phonemes through engaging activities that incorporate listening, speaking, and interactive tasks. Great. So what does that actually look like? So there are 5 categories of look fors, and you'll notice that each of the 5 categories relate to a strand in the 4.0 teaching rubric. So again, this falls right in line with your 4.0 process as something that can kind of fill in the gaps as you're coaching and preparing teachers for that evaluation. So you'll have look fors for instructional techniques, student engagement, materials and resources, differentiation and support in the classroom environment. So for K2, if you are coaching a teacher through instructing phonemic awareness, you want to make sure you're looking for systematic explicit phonemic awareness instruction, modeling, guided practice, multisensory activities such as clapping, tapping, using manipulatives, students who are actively engaged. You want to look for small group or one-on-one instruction as needed, and sufficient visual aids and anchor charts that reinforce phonemic concepts. And there's place here for you to write down your observational notes, things that you see the teachers doing, and the same things that you see the student doing. Then you have your post-observation, and 2 pieces of the post-observation that I just want to point out is this one question here: how well did you integrate that essential focus, the expectation of the indicator, and the overarching expectations? The other point is, what can you, as the coach, the observer, the evaluator, do to support that further? So having that post-observation conversation where you maybe provide some feedback and the teacher says, you know what, I need additional support. What could that look like? Maybe you co-teach, maybe you model a lesson, help analyze student data or work, plan collaboratively, but that's part of the conversation that you have in that post-observation. So as we shift back into 3.5 from what's included with K2, think back to that Venn diagram chart. We know that there's a shift in the ELA Essentials between K2 and 3.5, not because K2 doesn't do some of the things that 3.5 does or vice versa, but because we know we need to build those foundational skills in K2 first before moving to some of our more varied content skills in 3.5. So you also have a table of contents for 3.5. It includes those same things right at the beginning that K2 did. But we have a change in our ELA Essentials. Now we're looking at critical reading. We're looking at critical reading, which falls under applications of reading. This is your informational text. Literary analysis, which is your applications of reading literary text. Written expression, which is written and oral communications. You've got oral expression, academic language and vocabulary, which falls under applications of reading, and then research, which is obviously the research strand. One thing that I neglected to mention with K2, but you have for both K2 and 3.5, you also have overarching expectations look fors. So if you are specifically just focusing on an overarching expectation, maybe a teacher needs some coaching in how to get her students collaborating more, writing for a more varied purpose, then you can use your overarching expectations look fors for that. So again, your pre-observation will include your essential focus. You want always to point teachers back to the grade level indicator and then consider your overarching expectations. You will also have your grade level expectations. So this particular example is written expression. And you can see there, here's the third grade. It includes all the indicators that directly relate to written expression. Your look-fors have the same description and 5 categories: instructional techniques, student engagement, materials and resources, differentiation and support, and the classroom environment. So again, if you're coaching through written expression, you should be looking for all modes of writing, integrated grammar and conventions instruction, opportunities for students to collaborate, exemplar and mentor text. So it tells you exactly what you should be looking for when you are observing written expression instruction practices. And then again, you have your post observation, which includes those 2 key points of how well were these integrated, and what support can you provide next. Again, pushing into that theme of this isn't an end, but this is an ongoing, continuing process of development. So that's a lot, and it was very quick, and you are going to have time to dig in. But before we do that, I would like for you to just take a brief minute to pause. What did you learn? What are you thinking about? And what do you think your next step is going to be in regards to this coaching document? And you can unmute or put it in the chat. Awesome. Love that, Tanya. Have a walkthrough observation focus as a leadership team. Common language, develop capacity of the whole team. Yes, Kathy, practice. No, Jennifer, yes, practicing it. Yes. Very good, Emily. Thinking about using it as a way to get comfortable with resources and as a systematic and effective way to coach new teachers. Yeah. Tell them it's your mock 4.0, right? Love that. Love that you've already introduced it to your admin team, the alignment. Excellent. Helps you have a more focused observation tool. Yeah, you could even have it alongside your 4.0 if you wanted. And if you're really specifically looking for those targeted skills, excellent. So someone mentioned that they would like to practice it. Good news, you're about to get to do that. So we're going to practice putting it in place. So I am interested to see how this is going to work out. This is the first time we've done this little activity virtually. So I'm going to kind of go over the instructions, and then we'll break it down and get started. And hopefully there'll be no hiccups, but if there are, we'll smooth them as we go along. So as I have you practice this, a couple things I want you to consider are those grade level indicator expectations. I'm going to give you some pre-observation coaching conversation notes for the scenarios you're going to be looking at. And then also you want to consider that coaching checklist. So in a moment, I'm going to push you into breakout rooms that are grade level specific. Now, it doesn't matter which room you're in, whether you teach kindergarten or support 5th grade, you're just whatever room you're in, we'll go with that. It'll either be a kindergarten room, a 2nd grade room, a 3rd grade room, or a 5th grade room. Okay. When you get popped in, you're going to have 2 tasks to complete independently first. So the first thing you'll want to do is watch the scenario video. And I'll show that to you in a second. And you're going to observe the teacher. You're going to take notes using that checklist. You're going to look at the targeted grade level indicators. And you're going to do that part independently. Then once everyone in your group is wrapped up, none of the videos are more than 10 minutes. You will, as a group, decide what support does this teacher need. So you'll discuss the observations you made, the things that you wrote down as you were watching the video. You will look at your post-observation coaching conversation guide to provide feedback to this teacher. And then your deliverable at the end of the breakout room will be the next step. So what are you going to do for this teacher next, and why? And when we return from the breakout room, one person from your group should be ready to share what y'all have come up with. Now, let me show you an example before we get you into rooms. So if you are in the kindergarten room, this is what you will see. You'll open up the kindergarten document that I'll show you in a moment. And here are your independent steps. So maybe as a group, you'll say, okay, this video is 6 minutes long. In 10 minutes, we will reconvene and discuss. You just decide that as a group. You can read the background from this teacher. So who is this teacher? Miss Savitsky. You can read the pre-observation notes that were taken with her before she taught this lesson. Then you will watch the video and take notes on your checklist. Okay. From there, as a group, you review your coaching conversation guide for post-observation. And most important, now I want to ask, what's your next step for support? So if you were in a kindergarten room and you were the group spokesperson, if you want to maybe give a very brief synopsis of what you watched and what your group decided was going to be your next step.
Yes. Hi, with kindergarten, we just, we really did not discuss the next steps because, of course, ran out of time. But I think some of the things that we did notice when we look on our look for is the observational tool, because it was focusing on vocabulary. She didn't have a lot of visuals during her lesson, so definitely, may have a conversation with her as far as providing different resources for the students to be able to use. Some of those visual cues will help the students definitely make a closer connection when it comes to vocabulary words, and help them build more independence as they explore and learn through maybe like charts or, anchor charts, or even some type of visuals of the vocabulary word on the board. So maybe some of those ideas will help the teacher.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else from a kindergarten room? I think we had two.
And I just want
Maybe
to
three.
add, she could probably use Frail models, support those new vocabulary.
Absolutely. This was the interactive read aloud, right? With the My Lucky Day. Did you notice too that she didn't always like there was no room for the students to kind of figure it out themselves? She immediately gave that definition. So I love the idea of using some kind of tool to really support the students' exploration of that vocabulary. Very good. Anything else from kindergarten?
I thought there was a lack of letting the students like use the word like in their own sentence or just in their own way. It was very teacher.
Yeah, and so that's actually indicator language, right? Students being able to use those words and practice those words. So I love that. Thank you, kindergarten. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was here. We're from the other room. We
yes.
we talked about too that there was it was a lot of words that she was kind of drawing the kids' attention to. And so we wondered if maybe instead of she was teaching the story, instead of using the story to teach the indicator.
Oh my goodness, that literally, okay. I haven't cried in a webinar in a while, but that comment brings tears because that's exactly right. Because there's such a, I think, misconception and just maybe traditional practices where you teach stories, not skills. And you're exactly right. We've got to let the skill drive the read aloud, the lesson, the strategy, whatever it is. The indicator skill rather than teaching a text. And Mandy had a good point. How many words are appropriate at the kindergarten level? Do we focus on 2, 3, 10, every hard word that we come to? Gosh, that's so good. Such good stuff. Second grade. Where are my second grade spokespeople?
Hi, we did not get to all of our group
That's okay.
discussion either. So second grade, feel free to chime in. One thing I noticed that on the pre-conference, she said that the students would demonstrate by reading words using correct sound independently, and that's something that we did not see. They weren't reading them independently. Um, Another thing was that the teacher was doing all of the hands-on that I saw. So any other next steps, you all could chime in because we did not really get to that part in our group.
I love that, Faye, that she could have very easily, well, first of all, she was using high quality, she was using her instructional material, she was using her curriculum, the one, I think it was Wonders, that had some manipulative things, but she could have called a student up, right, to manipulate those texts, or she could have had letter tiles in small groups and have them manipulating the text for that long I sound. So I love that you noticed that need for students to have their hands physically in that work and in that letter work. Very good. Thank you. What else, second grade?
We had the second group for second grade, and we kind of talked to similar. Sorry, hold on. And we just talked about, the opportunities for growth being how she is supporting all students and has a true understanding of their learning. So we talked about building out those learning progressions for the standard and then having a success criteria so that she could assess them based on where they are. So even if they're not sharing out, like what's the opportunity for some student to submit some type of product to be able to support.
I love that, Alexis. Very good. And Faye, another thing you said that I just forgot to mention on too is that you looked back at the pre-conference notes, and what she said she was going to do didn't necessarily align with what she was doing, right? So how do we help teachers and do exactly what you said, Alexis, but maybe for the teacher, like here's your success criteria, here's what we're looking for in your teaching practices. When you say this is what it's going to look like, how do we make it look like that in practice? Do we have any other second grade groups? Or just 2? All right. Third grade.
So at first glance, watching the lesson, it was very engaging. The students had text in hand and were working collaboratively. So we're like, oh, this is great. But then if you really drill down to the indicator, the lesson did not really match the purpose of the indicator. So they kept using the term main idea. The teacher gave the main idea. The graphic organizer that she was using was a little confusing. She kept referring to main ideas like the top of the table and your supporting details are the legs. But then the graphic organizer on the board was more of like an comparing and contrasting an idea web. And so I think at first glance, you're like, oh, this is great. But then when you really drill down to the indicator and looking at her pre-conference, she said it was a new skill. So I could see maybe giving them the central idea or stating the central idea for them at first and helping them understand that concept and then moving towards them finding the central idea themselves, but it definitely was not aligned. And so I think next steps would be doing some co-planning and having her look back at the indicator. We talked about, that term, the terminology, and how if you're going to use that table ideas like a concept, sometimes those little tricks aren't the best way to help students understand a concept, but definitely doing some co-planning with her so she can get to the root of the indicator and making sure that the lesson aligned.
Jessica, that is the heart of why this tool was developed, is that I could walk into any classroom and see that the instructional strategies are engaging and kids are collaborating and we're writing and we're talking and it looks beautiful. But if I haven't been, ankles deep in the indicators, neck deep in the indicators, I wouldn't know that, there might not seem to be a big difference between main idea and central idea, but the indicators say central idea. That's what students are going to see on assessments. We need to use the language of the indicators. If you're not in ELA content every single day, that's not something you pick up on, right? So I love that you went back to the indicator, found out where there was some disconnect in the true intent of the indicator and how that was being instructed. So yes, maybe engaging doesn't equal indicator aligned, and our goal always is to be indicator aligned. And that brings up another good point. With our high quality instructional materials, the curriculum that's been adopted, many of them say and this is just one example, but many do say main idea instead of central idea. So how do we coach teachers into using those high quality instructional materials with integrity rather than maybe fidelity, with, making sure that the language that we're using comes from our standards glossary or our indicators rather than maybe what a curriculum calls it. So I love that you brought that up. So yay, kudos. Third grade, any other rooms?
In our room, we talked about the differentiation, and that was also brought up about what is the real focus of the lesson. I think she did a good job with the supporting details. We were confused by the word web as well as to why we would use that graphic organizer if we were really trying to do the central idea with the supporting details. It seemed like the word web was a little confusing for students. But we also said for next steps, we might look at differentiation because we really couldn't tell based on the groups that was set up how she was differentiating for each student in the room.
Love that. Love that. I think we had one more third grade group, did we? Or I think maybe they did kindergarten instead because somebody forgot the video. That's okay. All right. Fifth grade.
Hey, so with our video, we had a seasoned teacher, but it was evident in the pre-conference that she had not thought about scaffolding for her students. And so, but then when we watched the video, it was evident that the pre-conference had really spurred her into being reflective and thinking about that part of her lesson. And so we liked how she brought in the folded pieces of paper for each reason, and then she focused on one reason to justify using personal experiences, and she did a great job modeling that and then having the students turn and talk. Then we didn't really see what happened next, and so our questions were, were the students definitely had an idea of what to, from their turn and talk time, to add their own personal experiences, but as far as were they ready to write? And did they really see that modeled for them? So again, we would like our next steps to be looking at that differentiation and seeing that second part of that modeling, and then how does the teacher differentiate to support her students?
Yeah, I remember when she said to them, I'm not going to write this in front of you today. I'm just going to show you one that's already written. I thought the same thing of like, that probably would have been nice to see the mess of it, right? To see how you're actually going to integrate that personal story into a text you've already written, right? And be in that revision process. So very good point. Any other fifth grade rooms?
We also agreed with the quality of the exemplar and the strategy she used, where each one of those main points that they were going to justify. She had it organized by the little folded piece of paper. We also talked about the differentiation piece, like wondering what the student work looked like. So our next step that we recommended was to actually sit along with the teacher and do a student analysis of work, and maybe talk about sorting them into high, medium, and low, and look at some commonalities so that we could decide what it was that they needed differentiation on.
Yeah, love that. Love the different types of support you guys are suggesting to meet varying needs with these teachers. Very good. Any other comments about 5th grade? Okay, so in the chat, if you could just right, Cynthia. Yeah, saw them talking. And that's kind of the nature sometimes of an observation too, right? You don't always stay for the entirety. So you only see what you see, right? So in the chat, if you could just give me one sentence summary of something you learned, something you liked about this. Maybe you have a new feel for the tool itself. Just what are you thinking? Give me one sentence. I love that, Faye, how it looks and sounds. Encourages reflection. Absolutely. How important pre-conference is to the coaching. Yeah, like that example where the pre-conference didn't match the lesson, right? And so how do we fix that? How do we get that gap fixed? Differentiation tools. Template makes you aware of what you did not observe. Right, yeah. Because if you have some teacher-student observations that are empty, like that box is empty, that could be a starting point for coaching. Okay, I didn't see this. How can I help this teacher coach into that? Yes, what the standards, the indicators look and sound like and don't look and sound like, or what they should look and sound like. Absolutely. I love it. All right, so now I have a little bit of homework for you as we wrap up today. You may know that there is a second session. I think it is the beginning of December, end of November. Mandy maybe can look that exact date up for me. I can't remember off the top of my head. But I have a goal for you I have a task I would like you to complete, particularly if you plan on coming back to that follow-up session. And it's just to set a goal, okay? November 19th. Okay, Polly, thank you for remembering that. I want you to set a goal for our November session. I want you to think about something that's actionable, measurable, or observable. So find your lens. If you're an evaluator, a coach, a teacher, how might you use this tool to support your use of the 4.0 rubric? How might you use it to support instructional coaches or classroom teachers? So on your landing page, 4 and 5, there's a goal setting graphic organizer. And I want you to just think through what a goal might be. Could it be that you use this with one teacher? Find a teacher you know is really receptive and say, hey, I just need to practice this. Can we practice? Maybe it's, you know what? I don't know this particular section of indicators as well as I should. I'm going to go study these. Whatever it is, I want you to go ahead, take a moment and just jot down that goal. The second page of the organizer is there just for you to write notes, progress monitor, self-reflect, just keep it in one place. And then in November, we'll use these graphic organizers in part of that webinar. So I'm going to give you just about 3 or 4 minutes to start thinking through that goal. And then we're going to do our final little pieces of reflection and feedback, and we will be done. So take a minute,